Welcome to the Sync Up with Infor, a dynamic discussion between leaders in the life sciences industry. Over the next 6 episodes, we're unlocking the secrets to a connected and integrated biotech and pharma industry. From the power of interoperability to the strategic choices behind integration engines, this series covers everything you need to know about building a robust data ecosystem, with insights from industry experts, case studies, and practical tips. Each episode offers a new step on the path to data-driven transformation. Let's start building the future together. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Sync Up series from Infor. I am Jeff Mueller, your host and moderator. In our last episode, we explored interoperability, how linking data across systems can drive safer, more reliable research and patient outcomes. We looked at real-world examples where interoperability is making a transformative impact in the biotech and pharma landscape. Today, though, we're turning our focus to integration. Remember our 3 pillars as introduced in episode 1, interoperability, integration, and connectivity. So our next episode is going to be connectivity. So today, we're turning focus to integration, the critical process of connecting workflows and systems to streamline operations and reduce time to market. We'll discuss how integration not only cuts costs, but also sets a foundation for efficient, scalable solutions in healthcare and research. So let's dive in. I want to welcome back our participants, Elisa Cascade. I'm going to try to do your role here, Chief Product Officer at Advara, current Chair of the Board of Trustees at the ACRP, the Association of Clinical Research Professionals, and of course, Alexis Moores, Senior Account Manager at Infor. Welcome, ladies. So, let's dive in. Let's continue to get to know each other on a kind of a fun level. So, Elisa, we'll go to you first. If you could have any fictional character as your coworker, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's such a hard one because there's definitely fictional characters that I would want to hang out with, but I'm not really sure I would want them as my coworker.
I got a few that came to mind.
Yeah. And so now I'm going back through, okay, what have I been watching on Netflix and Apple TV Plus? And, who is it that I would really like to have? I think I would want to go with somebody who is funny and would keep me entertained. So I think I have to go down the comedic route, but also somebody who's really, really smart and can help get my work done for me. So who would that be?
I feel like you need like some type of fictional character from one of those investigative discovery kind of scenarios,
Oh, yeah. Like a CSI kind of,
Yeah, and you're like, it's corny funny, so I'm gonna laugh. But also, I mean, I guess it's intuitive of what you're thinking about.
yeah. Or we could go like really old school and say Magnum PI.
Oh, there you go.
But
That's a
now
good
the
one.
question is, whoever's listening to this out there, do you remember the initial one with Tom Selleck, or are you completely into the reboot? I don't know. We never saw the reboot, I must say, but I did watch it as a kid.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. My husband and I always talk about how there's always reboots of shows, and you go to have conversations, and you're not on the same wavelength at all. You're like, yep, same title, but we're talking about 2 very different things here.
So, Alexis, I hope this one doesn't go over your head when I tell you that we had one of those moments when I was working. We had a study come in called the Copacabana study. And so, if you're of a certain age, when you hear the word Copacabana, immediately you go to Barry Manilow, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the head of the project management group at the time started singing Copacabana and only got blank stares at the 20-somethings staring back at her and did not know the song. So we now have this test, which is if you don't know who Barry Manilow is, you're not old enough to be working at the company. No, I didn't mean it that mean.
You gotta go.
You can work with us, but still.
That's how you weed people out, right?
Yes,
So,
the Barry
yeah.
Manilow test.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I love that. And now that song is stuck in my head, so I'm going to be
Sorry.
humming that later on. So yeah.
Who would you say, Jeff?
I don't know. I think maybe Ted Lasso. I think that's going to be maybe it's
Oh, dang it! That would have been a
but,
good one. I love that show.
yeah,
That is a
yeah,
good
because
one.
I would love just to go sit down and have a beer and listen to his kind of analogies on life, right? And it's just the way he summarized everything. It's like he makes everything so easy, right? And yeah, because I think sometimes we overthink things. So I think that would be mine.
I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Good answer. Really good answer.
I can't play this game. I've got 3 kids. All I watch is like Coco Melon and God knows what else. It's
Yeah.
not fair. It's not fair.
I'm dating myself again. So if I think about my girls, mine would be Barney, right? And people, I don't know if even Barney's still a thing, right? And now that song is like integrating into the Copacabana song, and I've got the whole
Oh
it's
yeah,
all
little
meshing
I
up.
love you,
So yeah.
you love me. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, look, I matched
Cabana,
too.
yeah.
Oh, you
So
do?
yeah.
Purple?
It's
Was it a
perfect.
Yeah.
subliminal purple message that came through?
I don't
It
know.
was. It was. And if anybody could see my notes for these podcasts, I have them. I'm a little particular about how I do things, and I have them all itemized by color. And this episode's color is purple. I'm not kidding you. The whole episode's color.
It's going to be our theme today. I can feel it. Purple theme.
I know. I love it. Here we go. All right. There you go. We set you up for success, Jeff. Now
We may take a
moderate.
couple minute break, and I'll go ahead and throw on the inflatable Barney costume. So and come back.
don't.
So
Please don't.
okay.
So-
Okay. There was a line, and I just got right up to it, Elisa. So yeah.
She pulled you back. It's all good. She pulled you back.
Yeah, always. That's what she does. Yeah.
Here for that.
Okay. Wait, Alexis, did you have one?
No, I really don't. I'm not
just-
kidding you. Everything that I watch is either correlated to one of my kids' activities, so either motocross or horseback riding, and kids' shows. The stuff that they watch, I'm like, what the heck is even happening on these shows? And then by the time it's time for me to like sit down in the evening and watch an adult show, I am so brain dead that I don't even know what I just watched. It's an hour goes by and it was all a blur.
It'd be fun to do a podcast, dressed up as a fictional character. And
Barney.
we're really, yeah, Barney. Yeah.
Done. We already figured yours out.
I'm really, I'm really digressing. So let's get back. Let's try to get back on track. We'll try. Elisa, let's start with you on this one. Can you share a moment when you saw integration transform a project's outcome?
Gosh, I'm dating myself now, but somewhere around 2013 or so, the company I worked for was approached by a couple of different pharmaceutical companies, and they wanted to figure out how could they collaborate and work together in a pre-competitive way in the site identification space. And the idea was that if they could share their information in their CTMS in terms of like site names and recruitment outcomes, that they could better select sites for studies, which in turn would make it more efficient for the entire system. You would be more likely to recruit, and you wouldn't waste the site's time unnecessarily in feasibility for studies that they weren't really capable of performing. And so this initiative was called the Investigator Data Bank. It started out with 3, it quickly grew to 5. And when you speak about it with a company, it was really interesting at the time. The first response was, you can't do that. And it wasn't an integration thing. We figured out the integration. We were able to map this field in one data set means this in another. That wasn't the problem. The problem was actually privacy. You can't do that. Well, why can't we do it? And it became this journey whereby it started out as a standalone initiative. It then got taken on as a Trans-Cellared initiative called Investigator Registry. And what we started in 2013 has now grown to 16 different pharmaceutical companies sharing data. And we were able to, the integration, as I said, there was a standard sort of specification that we mapped everybody to, but it really was the privacy, you can't do that, or it was the internal barrier of you're giving all of our secrets away. And at the end of the day, the answer to that is we all use the same sites. We all work with the same sites in this industry. It's very unusual to find sort of that one site that's never worked with the top 16 different companies in the United States, right? So I think for me, it was a very interesting experience, not only where we had to figure out the integration, but in addition, we had to deal with privacy and corporate politics on top of it.
That's interesting. Yeah, because not only are you trying to go feet first, head first, what have you, into just making the integration portion of it work, but then you have all of the different opinions and, as you said, the policies within various organizations and belief systems that come with that too, of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and the hierarchy within each individual organization. You mesh that in, and that's always a fun thing to try to try to figure out and work through. It's like walking through quicksand.
It very much is, but it's interesting. It was really sort of a step function in the terms of we got everybody to agree at a low level. And then we said, great, we're operating now here. What if we're now going to add an index? Okay, well, you're publishing dates. I don't see why you can't just do a calculation that is not subjective. I mean, that is a real piece of data. And then from there, it was, okay, well, can we now add in sort of a median to show people sort of how it ranks one site versus another within the scheme? Okay. I mean, we were so worried and we were so cautious about any kind of blacklisting, for example, and avoiding that. But what it really was a lesson in was pragmatic innovation. And I think that the same thing holds true in integration as well, which is you could boil the ocean and you could try to do every single variable in every single way, and it will take you 5 years and you will get nowhere. And I think for me, this was one of those life experiences where I learned that if you start at step one, get everybody bought into step one, you then can progress to step two, step three, and step four, everybody working together.
Yeah, absolutely. Use it as building blocks rather than trying to hope that you get the whole bridge built from the get-go.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah. I think sometimes that's where, healthcare in general is behind other market segments because of the liability of the type of data, right? The PHI data. Because I've been, early in my career, involved in projects where all of a sudden you get to the legal aspect of something, right? We have got a good concept, got a great idea. We know it's going to make, an impact to patient safety and everything else, but who's going to be liable for that PHI data, right? And how do you make sure you're moving forward in a productive way, in an innovative way, and kind of just checking the box very quickly on who's going to take that on, and then it comes down to a business case. So, yeah, and I think Alexis, like when you think about the liability behind that, like what are we doing as a company to kind of take some of that liability off from an integration perspective?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question. I know that there has been a major transition in that regard when it comes to being able to use FHIR-enabled data and anonymizing data in that capacity, especially when you talk about PHI. And I think that's something that, from Infor's perspective and with our product Cloverleaf, that we've honed in on pretty exponentially over the past year. We're in a lot of different organizations that help support and actually have helped with a lot of the different rules that have been built out for FHIR and FHIR formatting. So I know that's something that we focus on tremendously. But I think also one of the things that we do well is we listen. We listen to conversations that we have with our customers, and we take back things that we might not have thought of ourselves. We take it to our developers and say, how can we do this? Or is this something that maybe we can, with what we already have, we do, we just haven't applied it in that capacity. And I think that across the board, organizations, through listening, can actually do a lot more than what they're even familiar with, their capabilities might be. But I notice that pretty heavily within Infor is that we listen and try to adjust, whether that be something, again, we already have, or see if it's something that we can develop to fit with the ever-changing needs of whatever the industry is that we're working with, whether that is the healthcare, whether it's retail, whether it's supply chain, what have you, manufacturing. It's always consistently changing. So what can we do to be in the forefront of those changes? Yeah,
we have as a company become very agile in how we go to market. That's a great It's a great, yeah. And actually, that question was off script, so I appreciate you answered it beautifully. So,
Here for it.
so let's go back to our three pillars. So we talk about connectivity, integration, interoperability, and some of the listeners have to be saying, like, isn't it the same thing, right? So what exactly is integration in this context, and how does it differ from interoperability?
I think that's a great question. And it's one that Alexis and I were sort of like chatting online about in terms of, how do you distinguish? Because so often I hear them used interchangeably, to be honest. So Alexis, I'll pass it over to you because I really like the explanation that you gave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my mind, I see integration referring to the point-to-point or unit-to-unit connection of a system. It enables them to communicate directly, it transfers data or functionality. It's a lot more localized or a specific interaction that you have. Whereas with interoperability, on the other hand, it connects the entire ecosystem, right? It ensures that multiple systems and applications, devices, if you're working with devices, they all work together seamlessly, but across that broader network. So it doesn't really matter what their individual origin is or what their design intention was initially. It's that entire seamless connection. And you're not focusing on an isolated connection. Interoperability really creates that whole cohesive environment where data flows, and it flows not just unilaterally, but it's a bidirectional functionality, and it creates universal accessibility for just a multitude of different concepts that you could come up with. The focus is on scalability, it's on collaboration, and it can be across diverse technologies and not just an isolated technology. So that's the way I see the two. I know it was kind of a long-winded answer to it, but it's really ultimately, to break it down, it's that point-to-point, unit-to-unit connection or a universal connectivity of varying ecosystems.
Just to build on that though, is that I can think of examples where both exist and they coexist at the same time, right? So in the previous episode, we used the example of the TMF reference file, right, as a standard to think about how you could transfer documents back and forth. But when you start to think about, and we had this use case come to us very recently where a sponsor said, hey, I not only want to have documents transferred back and forth, but I want to make it so that my staff live in their TMF. And everything that they do is through their TMF. And so there was an integration component to it too, where we had to make sure that certain actions that wouldn't necessarily be covered through the TMF master file, sort of typical reference standard, could also happen such that they could, send a request or create placeholders in other people's systems, things that would be sort of on top of what you would see in a standard interoperable
Yeah, that's
connection.
interesting. That is interesting. And I'm sure that's applicable in a lot more use cases that maybe wouldn't even come to mind initially. I mean, even in something that's in some people's mind minimal, right? But for that individual, that's their whole world. That is their entirety of their job. And so when you overlook something that you have that enhanced integration feature, it can be the world of difference for them. But other people's might look at it and be like, well, okay. I mean, we're really doing a lot there, but in the grand scheme of things, and I think, again, to talk back on episode prior to this one, is the enhancement of workflow that comes from integration and interoperability and efficiency and safety and quality and all of the words that we used before to describe. It's applicable in the same situation.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of time back, right? It may not be a big thing to someone, especially on the technical side, but for that person doing that work, it could mean 30 minutes a day they get back, or per patient, right? So it's huge. It could be huge. So, okay. So how can integration speed up time to market, and why is it so critical for the industry?
From my perspective, the integration piece of it means that we have to be able to get data from one system to another without duplicate manual re-entry. I mean, when you think about that at its most basic step, if you can make that happen, then you are going to start to not only benefit on speed, but also benefit on data quality in addition to that. And so one of the things that we've been looking at is how can we, and I mentioned this earlier, how can we get data from EMR to eSource, and then data from our eSource into the sponsor's EDC? And how can we do that not only to avoid all this duplication of effort, manual reentry, but also to improve the quality, Alexis, to your point earlier, because you don't have the human error piece of that. At the end of the day, what that allows is the sites to be able to handle more studies at once. And in these large academic medical centers, from the site side, which are having significant shortages in research coordinator staff capacity, this is really important. It may sound small, but eliminating the duplication of effort is huge to the sites.
Yeah, one of the things that we've kind of thrown around too, and I'd really love to hear your thought on it, would be to almost do like a whiteboard session, right? Where you have a lot of different industry leaders come together and really determine a monetary value to put on time. I don't think that there, and I could be completely wrong, I haven't read everything out there, but I don't think there is any very good or validated resource that's not really assumptive for a monetary value for time saved and what that time and money looks like. How much time is it overall, but also what is that specific individual's time worth? What is the cost of keeping the organization open, the lights, the power, everything else that comes into that? Are people staying overtime? And what is the cost of the individual's, mental state of being there? Are you going to be able to retain more individuals, or are we going to keep going down this path of not having enough staffing because of things like that? I think that there's a lot of factors that play into that, and having kind of a overall whiteboard session of that would be really interesting to see the different perspectives, but also maybe be able to put a valuation on some of it.
So I've been involved in the creation of a couple of different ROI calculator models, which attempt to do the kinds of things that you're talking about. And I'll tell you one of the really fascinating pieces of the exercise, and this happened when we were trying to look at what's the value of a decentralized clinical trial in the DCT space, right? Is that the value is different depending on the perspective of the decision maker. Yeah, think about pharma, right? Where you have a person who is a manager of a study. And so their perspective is the clinical budget on that particular study, right? Now pretend that you are the head of clinical in a therapeutic area. And you're not just looking at that one particular study, but you're looking at your entire portfolio. And you're trying to think, okay, how can I maximize the value coming out of my portfolio, not just cost optimize one study? And now think that you're at the C-suite level, because unfortunately a lot of decision making where R&D and commercial come together doesn't come until you get to like the C-suite level. But pretend now that you're at the C-suite level, and now you're starting to think about what's my return, because I get value based on time, right? And so while that time may seem a little bit important at the study coordinator level or the study manager level, more important at the portfolio manager, and critical sort of once you get to the C-suite level, it becomes difficult because of the level at which you're usually having the decisions may not be all the way at the C-suite where they're thinking about both factors.
So when you do that study, this might be getting a little off topic. This is purely a curiosity question. Are those weighted? Are those responses weighted based off of the individual's role? How do you deal with that?
We have looked at the way that we've done it in the past, especially when we've created ROI calculators, is to think about cost drivers and the ability to turn on and turn off different cost drivers. So if the commercial time to market, for example, and commercial additional days of commercialization of the asset, you could have that turned on as a benefit or off as a benefit. And so rather than weighting them, it became more of you can tailor the output of these models to contain the cost drivers that you're most interested in.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I like that. Yeah, it seems to be much more efficient than potentially weighing out, because that would, I'm assuming, would be subjective as well. So you want to eliminate any subjectivity when generating a model like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure your similar experience to mine, which is if you've seen one pharma company, you've seen one pharma company, and they all have sort of different hot buttons. And so, what may be a big issue in one company is not perceived to be a bigger issue in another. And so they can tailor the model to their needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. I'm gonna have to talk to you a little bit more offline about that and just pick your brain,
Sure,
because I find
yeah.
it really interesting. Yeah, I could go on for another hour just about that.
Good perspective, good insight. So, Elisa, let's move on to the next Purple Barney segment. We'll call it. So, discuss some common obstacles faced during integration, such as compatibility and system limitations.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had what on paper should have been a very straightforward integration situation happen within the last year or so. And we had a standard because we were using sort of the CDISC, sort of data model definitions. So there was a standard, and we were able to map the standard. And what happened was there was a field that we were looking at, and one database was a single select and another was a multi-select. And the context at which the data field was coming across was different. And it literally, the database on one end could not handle the concept of having two entries within the context of their model and the way that data would show on their screen and et cetera. And so it's interesting to me that, the first thing you would say is, oh, is there a data standard that we can all follow? Check the box in this instance. But then the obstacles go even deeper in terms of the context in which that data standard is implemented, because we've even come across examples where the way that the data and the database was configured just isn't compatible between the systems.
So I think might have been the last episode that we were on together. You had talked about how a couple months ago we were together at DHAI on a panel, and I tend to go towards the conversation around my children. So anybody that doesn't know, I have a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old. But my 7 and 8-year-old, they keep me on my toes. But I can only correlate it, just like I did then a couple months ago, to them both running in the house at me, right? Screaming something, God knows what they're screaming, and my brain going, does not compute, because it's two different wavelengths of the same thing that they're really trying to tell me. So-and-so fell off of something most of the time. But it's trying to put them in together, and my brain saying, absolutely not, doesn't work. But just like you said, you have two fields coming in. Other system had one field, and it's not connecting. It's not making sense, right? So to dumb it down for the people that are more like me, that don't have that data background, if you have a couple kids yelling at you or a couple dogs, same thing when you're like, stop talking, please. But I think that's also, Jeff, something we have a lot of conversations with our customers about, because that's what our product, that's what we do with our product, with Cloverleaf, is we take a format in HL7 V2 and we move it into Fire or what have you. And it's constant conversations we have where they're like, well, I don't understand. That doesn't make sense. How are you going to do that? How are you going to make it understand? Make it make sense that it understands. But I think that's a common conversation we're having, don't you think, Jeff? Just across the industry too.
Yeah, and I think it's coming up more and more as we start thinking about AI and things like that. How do you make sure that the data coming in is translated in a way to make a productive use case out of it? And some of it is actually, at least, removing those duplicates, right? So knowing that we have a duplicate and only sending one, right? And keeping an audit of all that too. So absolutely. So when you think about, because that comes up a lot, and then you think about maybe you got it to work initially, then all of a sudden a source system changed, right?
Yeah, that's not what
Right.
happened to me. You can tell, right?
Yeah. So, and this is one of our episodes coming up is going to be buy versus build versus a hybrid approach, right? And I think this is an area where it makes sense to really start thinking about. And one of the questions I want us to talk about is what are some of those insights or into proven strategies for overcoming those strategies, and knowing that while you may have it working today, what about tomorrow? Because things are going to change, right? Fields are going to change. Databases are going to change during an upgrade. So how do you make sure you're talking about that? And I'll hand it to you, Elisa.
Yeah, we definitely have this issue with a product that we call Connect, and it's our sort of document transfer hub over here at Advara. And so it needs to connect to our IRB. It connects downstream to a site's eReg, which is like the site version of a TMF. It connects to the sponsor TMF, and all of those different systems are all constantly going through updates, just exactly as you said, Jeff, right? So by having sort of the middle hub, what we've been able to do is to sort of keep the changes separate from one another. Meaning, if I change something on the IRB side, it's an IRB to Connect change, but Connect still appropriately changes to the sponsor TMF. If they update their TMF, I don't have to change Connect or eReg. The Connect will change just so that we can continue the integration. So we have been able to sort of, I would say, insulate ourselves a little bit by designing that in a thoughtful way up front. But I will say, getting back to the title of this podcast, integration versus interoperability, I think that in some ways that's an interoperability example, but where it's felt more intensely is the point-to-point integration, where in essence it does break if you haven't built this more robust system to facilitate change in one system without the other.
Point. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I like how you kind of wrapped it back in because it's easy to define integration versus interoperability, but that was the best possible way to actually see it in action, quote unquote, of where each fit in the operational flow of things, I think that maybe that gave the listeners a little bit of a different perspective of, hey, this I word fits in here and this I word fits in there.
It is a lot, and if you don't get it right in the beginning or start thinking about the what ifs, all the work you have done, you have to table that and start over almost, right? And it's a lot of work. Okay, so let's go on to our next topic. Elisa, we're going to hand this over to you as our expert. So touch on how integration supports a connected ecosystem and transitions into connectivity.
No, I think that it's critical. And it's funny, we keep referencing back to the prior podcast as well. And I gave you the example over here at Advara. You have sites that are sort of working in their own context. You have sponsors or CROs that work in their systems. We have our IRB that has an IRB workflow system that really drives the whole approval process. And all of those pieces or ideally, you would want all of those pieces to connect with one another. And so what we've been doing is looking at ways that we can have information flow across all of those pieces. And that's how we've been using the word connect the ecosystem. And I like to give the example of Study Startup, I think is a really good one. There is not one system that's involved for every individual company out there. It just doesn't exist. There will never be one system that is going to do everything that everybody needs. And so because individual companies want to work within the context of their own system, we need to find ways to connect it together.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm kind of thinking on it. I have a lot of ideas that come up about that because I think a lot of organizations get almost fearful at the consideration of multiple vendors or multiple companies aiding in what their end result needs to be. But I think if you come up with a project plan that really that you ensure you don't delineate from, and you pick the right vendors to fit into the points that are necessary, you can really achieve something pretty amazing. But you can't be fearful of the concept of going in with that as the end result. Or just as you said, there's not one organization that's a fit for all, especially in this industry. There just really isn't.
Yeah, and I will say two things. Kudos on you on bringing up the idea of having a technology plan. And as companies are planning studies, I would wholeheartedly recommend that they look at that technology map and not just look at it from their own perspective, but please look at it from the site's perspective as well. And what you can't do is you can't make the sites use any single site technology or any single sponsor technology. Think about, you are now working at Yale and you could have 1,000 studies going on, and some of them may be industry sponsored studies, some of them may be investigator initiated trials, some of them could be NIH grants, right? How can you tell a company like that they can't use their own system? That you have to use the simplified system that I'm giving you. And you have to realize that when you think about, for example, like a CTMS at a site side, just as a quick aside, I about once every quarter get the question from a sponsor, and we got it at the panel, if you recall, why can't a site just use my CTMS? They are very different things. So if you think about now, you're in an academic medical center and you're participating in a trial and you see a procedure come through, you need to know whether that's part of the standard of care and they bill Medicare or the insurance company, or it's part of the study. You need to schedule that visit through multiple clinics and different places within the organization. All of that is built in the context. You need to pull in information from the electronic medical record. All of those integrations are set. So how are you going to tell the site that has integrations into their medical records, into SAP, into their scheduling system, into their employee directories, everything, that this is so ingrained? And oh, by the way, they're using this on 999 other studies. How are you going to tell them that they can't use it? It's just not an option. So we have to figure out how to integrate and be more interoperable.
Yep. And when we use the term a critical component, that is the most applicable context that can be applied to. I am not kidding you. That is an absolute critical component. There is no eliminating that. There really isn't. Yeah, it's something that, just as you said, that is where we have to be paying attention to interoperability. And as we're getting ready to talk about our next episode, the connectivity that comes into play with that.
It sounds overwhelming.
But to that point, Jeff, I think you're right. And I think that we can't just look at this like big, hairy problem and say it's overwhelming. We have to start to break it down. And so then the question becomes, how do you take something that seemingly at the start is unattainable and make it attainable, right? And I think we've been talking about these themes in terms of, you have a standard. You start to think about, what does that connection and what does that hub look like? How do you future-proof it so that both pieces can sort of incrementally improve without breaking the integration? I think there's been tremendous progress in terms of sharing API specs across different potential collaborators. I'll throw in the security review because we talked about that one as well. I think it was in the previous episode. And where I go with that one is that having standards like SOC 2 or ISO, where we're all sort of self-attesting into the security and privacy of our systems, all of these things are trying to enable the connectivity that we know needs to happen.
Yeah, I think just to have one more thought on it, and it's not directly associated with what you're saying, but just an overall thought process is walk before you try to run. Let's take the baby steps. Let's look at the baby steps, and let's take our little steps up until you're ready to, full sprint in the Olympics. And 30-36, I don't know, however long it takes. But really just take your time. And, that's actually something that we started off this entire series with Tope Keys, is talking about finding something to start with. Let's start with something, make it make sense, make it really, really work, do it the best you can, and then keep going from there, build from there.
Yeah, because I think it gets back to, Lisa, what you said earlier. Once you've seen one pharma company, you've seen one pharma company, right? Everyone's going to have unique use cases, and we saw this on a provider side. And I think the ongoing thing, once you saw an Epic implementation, you've seen one Epic implementation, right? So, and that's a big thing. So everything's unique, everything's different, and I think I would challenge our listeners to start thinking about your day-to-day job task and what, if you're going into multiple systems, let's talk about it, right? Because I think that's a place to start, right? And let's integrate or connect, and then we move on to kind of interoperability. So I think that's a great place to start, and I think those use cases will start to develop, and then I think some of them we can reproduce to other organizations, some of them we can't, but that's where companies like Infor comes in, and Alexis and I just want to talk and listen and see what we can do to help. So let's start to wrap this up. So Alicia, so wrap up this kind of episode in your point of view around integration.
I think that integration is a must, right? In order to deliver the efficiencies that we need as an industry, in order to facilitate the collaboration between sites, sponsors, CROs, integration is needed. And I love what Alexis said, and I also take a very pragmatic approach. Let's take the low-hanging fruit and then just build on that and then continue to advance.
Great
stuff. Alexis, how about you?
I honestly don't know if I have too much to add to that. I think really it's just we need to, as an industry, let me reframe that, figure out how integration, interoperability, connectivity fits in with what your end results are. Have that entire 50-foot view of what you want to achieve, and then let's talk through it. Let's talk through the steps and really develop a plan to help you achieve the goals that you're looking to achieve, and continue to move forward within this industry in the massive strides that it's made. Going back, not to keep this session going on for too long, but going back to the initial conversation that we had here, where Elisa talked about some initiatives she had in 2013, and look at what is achievable now, and look at what she started with and how it's grown from, I think you said 2 initially, and then 5, and now 16 organizations.
3, 5, and then
3, 5. Okay, I was so close.
16. Yeah.
but if you look at that and look at the growth and look at what is achievable, let's stay on that path. Let's keep it moving forward and keep doing what we're doing. Keep looking at that 22 logins that sites have, and how can we make that make sense for them? How can we streamline it for them? How can we create a workload that's feasible? I think that that's something that really needs to be thought about, and how interoperability and integration aids in that.
Outstanding. Okay, I will wrap it up then. In this episode of the Sync Up, we explored integration as a critical driver for efficiency and innovation in life sciences. Elisa Cascade and Alexis Moores shared how integration bridges the gaps between systems, enabling smoother workflows and faster time to market. A key distinction was drawn between integration and interoperability. While interoperability ensures systems can communicate, integration focuses on seamlessly combining these systems to work as one. This synergy accelerates project timelines, reduces cost, and boosts ROI, essential for meeting the demands of today's competitive landscape. The discussion also tackled common challenges such as system compatibility and provided actionable strategies for overcoming them, emphasizing the value of clear standards and collaborative implementation. Looking ahead on episode 4, we're going to focus on connectivity. We've talked a little bit about it, but it's the next layer of building a truly connected ecosystem. We'll discuss how connectivity builds on the foundations of integration and interoperability to unlock real-time data exchange and transformative insights. You don't want to miss out. I want to thank our listeners, thank our panelists, and to our listeners, please start to think about what could we connect, what could we integrate, and what could we change for interoperability to make your life easier. So please reach out. We look forward to joining you on episode 4, and thank you for listening today.